So as the shutdown drags on, cybersecurity experts are warning the U.S. is at greater risk of cyber attacks while the government is closed.
Right. In the words of one expert, we have laid out the welcome mat for nefarious actors. Before the shutdown, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen described cyber threats facing this country.
We are facing an urgent, evolving crisis in cyberspace. Our adversaries' capabilities online are simply outpacing our stovepiped defenses. In fact, I believe that cyber threats collectively now exceed the danger of physical attacks against us. This is a major sea change for my department and for our country's security. Indeed, most Americans go about their daily lives without fear of personal injury or harm from foreign adversaries, but our digital lives are now in danger every single day. And these virtual threats can have very real-world consequences. When the bad guys can remotely turn off the lights, when they can steal money from your bank account, shut down emergency services, the impacts go far beyond our smartphone screens.
Well, CNET senior producer Dan Patterson is joining us now. And Dan, you've written extensively on cyber threats, but also specifically, you've got an article coming out on the impact of the shutdown. So let's talk about this, about the impact. We know that, the government is particularly vigilant when it comes to cyber threats, but what's happening now?
So there's good news and bad news. The good news is we literally have dozens of departments whose responsibility it is to monitor and to protect us against cyber threats. The bad news is at some of these departments, up to 85% of the staffers have been furloughed. That's at places like NSIT, or NIST, that's the National Institute for Standards and Technology. This is the place that assesses threats and then helps notify others when there are severe threats happening right now.
You'd think that they would be considered essential workers when you hear the secretary talk about the graveness of this sort of threat, but they're not.
Yeah, so much of what we discuss in cyber can live in the theoretical realm, but these types of employees help guard us against attacks that are happening now. In fact, if you were to say, hey, 85% of anti-terrorist staffers have been furloughed, the country would be rightly worried. It's kind of equivalent.
Well, one branch of our armed services is not getting paid. That's the United States Coast Guard. And it does strike me that when you hear the Homeland Secretary talking about these threats, and then you hear the president talking about this threat at the border, which is essentially individuals that are coming to this country to escape either economic desperation or, in some cases, worse, terrorism, narco-terrorism, coming with their families to try and find a better life here. The president says it's a major national security threat. You've got the Homeland Secretary basically saying this is a major threat, and most people aren't even aware of the threats because we live in these worlds, in these tech bubbles that our entire lives are interconnected to. So who should the United States be looking at? I'm guessing it's not people streaming across our southern border.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Vlad. And in times like these, it's important to not conflate the human rights challenges that face many of those who seek refuge here in the United States with actual threats like what's happening in cybersecurity. So every expert I spoke with said there is a broad range of threat actors who could attack us right now, but there are two that people are particularly concerned about, and that is for-profit hackers, those who might sneak into systems, especially when they're unguarded, and steal information and then sell it to group number two, nation states, who might want to do us physical harm when we talk about critical infrastructure like the power system or water dams. Those systems could be physically attacked through cyber means and cause real-world damage. They could also, just like China did with the Office of Personnel Management hack a couple years ago, just exfiltrate millions and millions of records of personal data like your thumbprint, your social security number, stuff that really deeply identifies you across the web, put this in a database and save it for nefarious actions later.
So we're on day 26. Doesn't, at least at this point, doesn't look like there's an end in sight. Tell me what sort of issues we could be facing if this drags on. I imagine the more time, the more opportunity for, hackers to tick away at our defenses.
Well, let's put this in real world dollars, right? So if you had a business that was 85% laid off or had only 15% capacity of the workers there and they were attacked, it would cost millions of dollars. In fact, IBM does an annual cost of a data breach analysis for private business. Private business, it's a little cheaper for them to recover because most enterprise companies have cyber defenses just like we have here in the United States, and they're prepared to respond.
Right.
So if you think about the cost of a data breach, and we have this link in that story on CBSNews.com, the cost of a data breach to a business, almost $4 million per breach. The cost of a data breach to the government far exceeds that. So as time goes on, the real world cost to taxpayers goes up almost exponentially.
Wow.
Really fascinating stuff. Dan Patterson, always good to have you, my friend. For more on the cybersecurity threats facing the U.S., you can check out Dan's article, as he mentions. It's on the front page of CBSNews.com.
So